House this January the 30th, and we will open with a request for bill introductions. Is there any in the room? And we'll get the ones online. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning. Happy to see everyone made it here after a big win last night. But I'm Nathaniel Blank with Watkins Public Strategies. And here on behalf of Ideatic today, I would like to introduce RS 0680. And this would authorize certain telecommunications and video service providers to operate in the county right of way. Pending any questions, thank you.
Is there any objection to receiving this bill? It will be received. Thank you,
Chairman.
Any others in the audience? Okay. We have at least one online. Representative Adam, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here. Can the committee hear me?
Volume's kind of bad.
Okay, I apologize. Let me try to adjust. Is that better?
I think we can hear it.
All right. I have Committee 23RS0255, an act related to solar panels on houses.
Repeat the number again.
0255, sir.
Okay. All right. If there's no objection, that'll be received.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is there any other bill introductions? All right. Thank you. Next, if you've all received the minutes for January the 23rd to 25th and 25th, is there a motion to approve? Representative Blex and
Mr. Chair, I so move.
And Representative Amex. And all in favor of approval, say aye. All opposed, abstain, and it passes. Thank you. We're going to go straight into the next item. That is opening a hearing on HB 2082. And for that, we would like to have an update from the reviser, a brief explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2082 may look familiar to some of you who were on this committee last year, as a similar bill was introduced last session, House Bill 2676. The bill primarily deals with local county funds, authorizing the creation of a couple new funds and the expansion of an existing local county fund. The first part of the bill, Section 1, authorizes local county commissioners to establish a code inspection and enforcement fund. This would be to finance costs of code enforcement, including the operations, acquisition of equipment, and other capital needs. Would authorize the board to assess fees to be credited to the Code Inspection and Enforcement Fund and to transfer monies that can be lawfully used from other county funds into the Code Inspection and Enforcement Funds. Basically, it just gives them another financial tool to conduct those aspects of county business. The second section of the bill would authorize local boards and county commissioners to create what is called a Municipalities Fight Addiction Fund. This is tied into the Fight Addictions Act, which was an act passed recently to help cover the costs of litigation for opioid addiction liabilities. And so this would simply allow local county commissioners to establish a local fund for the receipt of monies that they receive from the state for those litigation costs, and go into that fund to be used to finance those costs that are incurred at the local level. Finally, the bill amends 19-119, which is the existing statute authorizing a county equipment reserve fund. The amendment would expand the uses of that fund, so there would be the county equipment and technology reserve fund. And so the additional uses for that would be to be able to acquire like computer hardware, software, and other technologies such as cloud computing services that the county may find it's necessary to have for county business. All the other provisions with respect to that fund are unchanged. It's just simply an expansion of the uses of that fund. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will mention that if this is enacted, it would go into effect on July 1st of this year. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for the revisor? Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In section 1, would this, if I understand this right, counties would be able to have their code enforcement all fee funded? Or is this just another tool to add to a budget?
I think it's just another tool that would be added to their ability to enforce their codes, because they can enforce and do code inspection, code enforcement right now. This is just giving them another tool, and maybe the proponents can more clearly address what the intention of that fund would be on a practical level.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Yes, Representative Belton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the funds that are recovered by the homeowners to the county for abatement charges, would this affect that at all? I mean, would they have to pay the funds back if they're recovered from abatement?
I'm not sure about that question. If the homeowners are recovering money, I don't know that they would.
Or not homeowners. Like I helped with one before I left my previous job, and we ended up getting about a $70,000 abatement because we had so much codes work done there, to take out stuff and all of that. And now the house is basically owned by the unified government and we're selling it. But my question is, so that money that they collect for the 70,000 that's collected, would that have to go back into this to repay, or would it just be?
Wouldn't have to go back into this fund, I don't think. I think that would be left to county discretion as to whether to make a transfer of those.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And are we going to have other folks speaking about this as well?
We're going to have testimony from the proponents. Yes, we will.
Do we have any information on why we're combining these 3 different areas within one bill? All right, maybe these may be more so for them, but maybe you can provide a little bit of feedback.
On a general level, bills have to have one subject, but that subject can be relatively broad. And so a bill dealing with multiple county funds in a single bill is within the constitutional allowance of a single subject. And so oftentimes bills with related topics will be packaged together for efficiency purposes rather than have 3 individual bills, one on each fund, that the committee would then put together into a single bill to send to the floor. That step's been kind of bypassed by putting them all together in a single bill like this. Now, any of those sections can be amended to be removed by the committee if the committee chooses not to pass that particular section of the bill. But
and then another question as well, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
And then where would the funding be coming from for these new bills and for the one that's being expanded? Is it something that's already statutory, or is this something that's new as well?
I think the only relatively new funding source would be the opioid litigation fund in section 2, because that's a relatively new act with monies coming from the state to reimburse locals for the opioid litigation costs. The other funds are basically just established to make it more efficient for the counties to use the funds that they have. There's no new source of funding here, and maybe the proponents can better explain what their intent is in terms of money management at the local level.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Long. We'll open this hearing with the proponents. First, we have Representative Howell, County Commissioner from Sedgwick County. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Howell's on her way up here right now, actually. Anyway, my wife is a state rep right now, so it's kind of I know it's confusing, but it's a bit of a joke. You know, I'd like to say, start off, number one, thank you so much for giving us a chance to introduce this legislation and actually advocate for its passage. This is a big deal to the counties. Believe it or not, cities can do already what this bill is going to allow counties to do. This is the difference between cities and county government. Cities can create these special funds, but counties cannot. And as a county commissioner, I've been on the county commission now 8 years. I'm starting my 9th year today as a Sedgwick County commissioner. One of my frustrations has been our budget. We have some very, very expensive things in our budget today that you don't want to pay for in a single year. You might say, I want to plan on several years to pay for this, and so we want to set some money aside for some technology. Believe it or not, I can't do that. Imagine, if you will, I want to change all of our computers that county-wide to the next level of Windows and put new Word and Excel on all these computers. It may be millions of dollars, and I've got to do that in a single budget cycle because I can't save money over multiple years. And that's just pragmatically the challenge that brought this to my attention initially. I asked our CFO, I asked our attorney, why can't we do that? Because the law doesn't allow us to do that. Well, then we should go change the law. It's just a matter of pragmatic accounting. This is what you call less government, more transparency, more accountability, and more freedom for us to manage our financial affairs. Let me just stress a couple of things on this bill. Number one, I'm speaking today on behalf of the Sedgwick County Commission, not myself. This is on our legislative platform. So Sedgwick County is on our platform last year. Actually, I'm not sure about it. Well, this was something we brought up later last year. May not have been on the platform last year, but it was later in the process, but is on our platform this year. So the county commission as a whole, all 5 commissioners did vote for this unanimously. And it did pass out of the Kansas House last year on a vote of 112 to 11, but it was late in the session. And by the way, there was, as far as I can tell, it looked to me like it was a technical amendment by reviser staff. I did testify in favor last year, but when the bill was worked, I think there was a minor amendment. I can see that the original bill and the amended bill by the House looks like a single word and very minor amendment. But because of that, it had to go to general orders. It did pass out of the House, went over to the Senate, and I think it was late in the session. They didn't have time to deal with it. A couple of other things. There are no new fees. Let me stress that. We're not talking about charging any new fees. It's about accountability. Let me give you one example. So there's 3 sections of this bill. Last year's bill, 2676, only had 2 sections. Last year dealt with the technology fund and the code enforcement. In other words, we have MABCD and MAPD. Those are 2 city and county government organizations that came together and merged. People say, you guys should consolidate government. Well, we did that. But these organizations charge fee funds, for example, plumbing inspections, electrical inspections, building permits. And they do this on behalf of the county and the city. But when the money comes together, who keeps track of the money? Well, the county's been doing that in our books and not the city. We're doing it on behalf of the city. But we're not really allowed to use that money for anything else. We can't pay the electric bill. We can't pay our staff. That money is reserved for code inspection, MABCD and MAPD, whatever it is that they do, that money stays over there in a separate fund, if you will. The problem is we're having to account for that, commingle the money in our own books. So we have to show it on our budget rather than a separate special fund that keeps those money separate from everything else we do. So in terms of transparency and accountability, we like to have those monies separated from whatever else we do in the county. And that just makes sense, but we've not been able to do that. So last year's bill dealt with that issue. It dealt with the issue of technology. Since then, the Attorney General's come out and said on this opioid settlement fund, by the way, this money comes from manufacturers of opioids, not from the state directly. The state receives money through litigation, and they send the money out to jurisdictions, municipalities across the state of Kansas. We receive those funds. The Attorney General said very clearly that we have to keep the monies separate. You can't commingle those funds with anything else we're doing. So this fits this bill. The point is, we would like to have the accounting tools we need to do our job and do it well. And we're not asking for permission to increase our fees. We're not asking permission to, I remember the question on abatement. This has nothing to do with that. This has to do with accounting of dollars in the county budget, making sure those funds are separated. I personally, I have multiple bank accounts. This is maybe a bad analogy, but I have a car fund and I have a different funds, maybe a vacation fund. I put money over there so I know I can kind of see it separate from my regular day-to-day accounting. Kind of like that. This money is separate over here. It's a special fund. We really can't use that money for anything else the county does. It has to be separated out. On my personal funds, I can make a choice to move money back, but in this fund, you can't because it's reserved. Let me give you one more example. I'm not sure this is not one I've talked about with our CFO yet, but back in 2016, we paid $7 million for election equipment. And we did save back for 3 years on the equipment. But election equipment is extremely expensive. I think we used the equipment reserve fund, which is in this base bill back in 1987, gave us a chance to do that. But technology is changing rapidly. We have to buy new iPads. We have to buy, it's just so many things that deals with elections that some of this stuff is extremely expensive. To do that in a single year, a single hit to the budget is extremely hard for our budget. So I would like to have the chance over a period of years to plan ahead and put money back over a couple of years to pay for the things we need to take care of services in our county. And that's basically what this bill does. Let me just say this. I like this phrase. It is a better way. This is a better way. We need the tools to do our job. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions for Commissioner Howell? Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Jim, for being here. Section 2, the opioid settlement, that would be a second separate fund is what you're asking. Am I understanding that correctly?
Right. So the bill does three things. It has technology, opioid settlement funds, and then the inspection funds for the MABCD, MAPD. By the way, this bill also benefits every county in the state of Kansas, not just Sedgwick County.
I understand that. Thank you for clarifying that.
Anyone else? Okay. If not, thank you, Commissioner, and we'll move on to the next testimony. The next proponent is Jay Hall, Director of General Counsel for Kansas Association of Cities, Deputy Director.
Morning, committee. Jay Hall, the Deputy Director and General Counsel for the Kansas Association of Counties, appearing as a proponent on House Bill 2082. As Commissioner Howell indicated, this bill does in fact benefit all Kansas counties, not just Sedgwick County. And it does three basic things. As Commissioner Howell indicated, it would allow counties to create two new funds, and these funds don't increase taxes or increase fees or anything like that. It just allows for them to separate those monies out for different uses, but it would allow them to create two new funds, the Municipalities Fight Addictions Fund, as well as the Code Enforcement and Inspections Fund. So those would be two new funds that would assist in the auditing and bookkeeping at the county level. And then it would allow them to expand the definition of the use for a third fund that already exists. And that would allow them to expand to different technologies. And the reason I bring up the Technologies Fund is, as I indicated in my testimony, this has not been updated since 1987. There are a lot of technologies that exist now that did not exist in 1987. And so this amendment actually helps capture and allow counties to use those funds for things like cloud computing that they simply weren't even contemplated in 1987, but now exist. But counties don't have a way to tap into those types of into the funds that are in this particular account for that purpose, because cloud computing is not captured in the definition of what that fund can be used for. And so really this comes down to, this is a simple bookkeeping bill that allows counties to create two new funds. And with the Municipalities Fights Addiction Fund in particular, this is actually required by the Kansas Fights Addiction Act. But as Commissioner Howell indicated, because counties cannot create these funds on their own, we actually need the specific legislation to follow the law as it is outlined in the Kansas Fights Addiction Act. And we also need this to obviously expand the use of that technology fund. And so with that being said, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Are there questions for Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hall, how are counties currently delineating these funds in their budgets so their constituents know how the money is being spent?
Well, so right now, for the code enforcement and inspections, as well as the municipalities fights addictions monies, those monies actually end up right now in the county general fund, and they kind of have to make a line item because they can't establish a separate fund. We want to establish those separate funds so that it's more clear in the budget, but right now it's in the general fund. I think some counties have tried to kind of separate it out, but it's essentially either in the general fund or in another general use fund.
And Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like what you said about it doesn't increase taxes for the counties. You said so using the money, you just want to be able to move it around a little bit more easily. And because I'm really struggling with what is the true challenge today that they have. If the money's already there, you already have technology. Like, I'm not sure I'm understanding the picture of the money's there. Can you describe a little bit more the difficulties and the steps you go through that make it so challenging and why this is needed?
Certainly. The challenge that exists within this is that we cannot separate those funds out for different uses. So this money right now just goes into the county general fund and is used from the county general fund for a lot of different things. Having these separate funds actually allows to say, if we have $50,000 that is in the technology fund, that's going to be used for technology. And so it makes it clearer for the residents of the county to understand, okay, $50,000 is over here for technology. We received $25,000 from the Kansas Fights Addiction Act, and that goes into the municipalities fights addiction fund, and that money can only be used for certain purposes, and that's really the purpose of these special funds, is they can only be used for those specific purposes. So with the municipalities fights addiction fund, for example, the opioid settlements require that money be used in specific ways. By law, we cannot use that money at the county level for anything other than those specific things. For accounting purposes, in order to demonstrate that we are in fact only using those monies for the allowed purposes, having a special fund that makes it clear that money is flowing only into that account and is only being expended for the allowable purposes under the court settlement makes it a lot clearer than having it flow into the general fund, where we now have to make sure that we delineate when we spend money for certain things. Oh, this is Kansas Fights Addiction Act money, not money that we are expending out of the general fund for these other purposes. And so it's really an accounting thing that makes it more clear how the money is flowing into and back out of the county.
Another question?
Just a follow up to that. From an accounting standpoint, you have general fund and usually have a subset that classifies technology under that. This to me seems like it's almost more limiting because you have to put it into technology, where general fund allows for you to have a little bit more flexibility with where you want to use it. Can you explain that? So like general fund would be one category, category two underneath the general fund with a subset would be technology, for example. I'm sure you probably have it set up where it's a tiered system within your accounting system. How does it not limit you now if you put it into two separate funds where now it has to be used for technology where maybe you could have used it in another way?
Well, certainly you can use it for a lot of different ways. This allows, as Commissioner Howell indicated, this allows you to maybe build up in technology if you know you're going to have a large expenditure. Like maybe you're saying, okay, in 2 years, we at the county level want to make a large expenditure to change our computing system. Well, maybe you don't want to spend that all in 1 year. This allows you to segregate that money in a separate account that is going to eventually, maybe not this year, but eventually be used to buy all new computers or buy a large piece of technology that maybe you would not spend all on this year, that you're using that for. As I said, with the municipalities fights addiction money, that money has to be segregated because as part of the court settlement, it can only be used in certain ways. And so it's really important that we segregate that money out, because if the court settlement determines that we are not using that money properly or cannot account for that money in a clear way, we could run into problems at the county level. And so we're really trying to cut that off by making sure that those monies are separated out.
comments, questions? Anyone else? Okay. Long, thank you. And I will, Paul, excuse me. And I will request any other proponents who are in the audience. Is there any other proponent testimony would like to be added to this? Okay. Not seeing any. Is there any opponents that are not listed that would like to speak to the committee? Right. None online, none in the room. Is there any neutral testimony to be given? All right. I will close this hearing. Excuse me, one more comment from the commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I was listening to the questions and answers. I just wanted to clarify. I have answers that I could answer. I could offer as well. So thank you for the chance to second bite at the apple here. So just a couple of things. For example, we have what's called SAP. That's our entire accounting system for the entire county. It's extremely complex and it's very expensive. We'd like to make that cloud-based, and we'd like to be able to pay for that over a number of years. What this fund would do allows us to pay for it by saving up money over a number of years. That doesn't normally, if you have these types of funds, you appropriate funds for some purpose. If you don't spend it by the end of the calendar or into the fiscal year, it rolls back into general fund. So it makes our general fund look bloated because we're actually reserving money in the general fund. You have to reappropriate money year after year to get that money built up enough. Well, in other words, rather than just showing that those funds separate for a purpose, we can't do that today. And the other thing I just wanted to say is, so the 2 points of this bill basically are this: carryover opportunities, which right now we can't do for those 3 things. We can't do any carryover, and we're not allowed to segregate the funds from our regular accounting. So the segregation of funds is about transparency and accountability, and so people can see what's going on. Thank you again.
Thank you for that clarification. All right, we will close this hearing and we will move on to any comments from the rest of the committee. We'll deal with this matter in disposition at another meeting. Is there any other comments before we close this meeting? Everybody looks excited. It's going to be a good day.